I just dialed in.
Look at that. Hey, you're okay. So I was just telling people I was waiting for you. I'm actually not waiting for you. Good to talk to you, my friend. How are you?
Yeah, I think the president would call that fake news.
It was. I just doled out some fake news, and I apologize. All right, let's get right down to it. I know that you just came out of a meeting, and you've been doing these all day, and you've got a lot to say. I want to start with what's trending on Twitter right now. You're probably familiar because you utilize Twitter better than almost anybody I know. Boycott NRA. For some reason, if we boycott the NRA, that's going to solve the problem of school shootings. It's delusional. You know that it is. I know that it is. But somehow it's effective, Ted. What's your comment on this?
Well, we've seen this now over and over again. Whenever there is a crime, whenever there's a mass murder, Democrats and much of the media immediately leap on it to try to advance their longstanding political agenda, which is to try to undermine the Second Amendment rights of law-abiding citizens. And they do everything they can to demonize the NRA. The NRA, as you know, is a citizens group all across this country,
right,
of men and women who defend the Bill of Rights and our right to keep and bear arms. I'm a life member of the NRA, and I'm proud to be part of an organization that defends the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Critically, the attacks from the left, the attack from the media, is not focused on stopping crimes. It's not focused on stopping murders like this. Gun control doesn't work to do that. If you look at the jurisdictions with the strictest gun control laws, cities like Chicago and Washington,
right,
they often have among the highest crime rates, among the highest murder rates. If you disarm law-abiding citizens, the criminals love it because it makes them more vulnerable to crime. If you want to stop mass murders like the horrifying murder we saw in Parkland, and every one of us was horrified at this evil monster targeting kids,
right,
or if you want to stop murders like the murders we saw in Sutherland Springs, tragically here in Texas, the way to do so is to target violent criminals. You don't go after law-abiding citizens. You go after felons. You go after fugitives. And you come down on them with like a ton of bricks. That's what we should be doing, and that's what I've been leading the fight in the Senate to do.
Well, I know that you're a logical guy, so am I. I think that you know that about me. We've known each other for a long time, and I cannot get from a logical starting place of let's secure the schools now. Let's make sure that your kids and mine are safe when they go to school and safe when they get home, along with the teachers, administrators, janitors, cafeteria workers, everybody. That you can't get from that, let's solve that problem, to NRA is bad. And by the way, the Second Amendment is given by God. The Second Amendment just tells the government you can't infringe this, but that's a God-given right. I don't understand why we would try to disarm more good people, because the bad guys, Ted, I'm guessing you agree, they're not going to, even if you banned guns, they're not going to listen. They're already willing to kill. They're going to, by any means necessary, do what they want to do. Shouldn't we at least allow the good American citizens to be able to defend themselves?
That is absolutely right. And you know, I'll tell you, Sutherland Springs, I was there.
Yeah.
The day after the shooting. I spent time with those who were shot, with the families who were grieving. And it was horrific. I'll tell you, Joe, I stood in that sanctuary. It was a small country church. The gunman had fired over 450 rounds in that church. You saw shattered glass, shattered wood. You saw church pews overturned as people desperately tried to save their lives. You saw blood and everywhere, shattered cell phones covered with blood. It's the most horrific thing I've ever seen in my life.
Right.
As I visited with those families, grieving these horrible losses, over and over again, they said to me, they brought this up on their own. They said, gun control is not the answer to this. I didn't bring this topic up with them. This is what the grieving families would say. One woman, a mom whose son was in surgery, had been shot. She said to me, gun control is not the answer to this. And she said, we all had our guns. We just left them in the car out of respect for the church.
Right.
She said, if any of us had brought our guns in, we would have stopped the gunman at the door. This never would have happened. And it was over and over again. That's what I heard from the incredible people at Sutherland Springs. And as you know, that horrific shooting was stopped by another law-abiding citizen, Stephen Williford, who heard about the shooting, ran, opened his gun safe, brought out his rifle. It was an AR-15. And he ran to the church, ran barefoot, didn't even take time to put on his shoes.
Right.
Got behind a pickup truck, yelled out to the shooter. The shooter came out. He was getting ready to execute a young man in the church, and the shooter stopped and came out. And Stephen Williford, who's an NRA rifle instructor, engaged with the shooter and ultimately shot him twice and saved a great many lives that day.
Well, we have no idea what that shooter was going to do next. Does he go to the next church? Does he go to a local grocery store? Without a doubt, the man you just mentioned and described stopped any more death that day. It's Ted Cruz, the senator for the great state of Texas, Republican, of course. Ted, I want to move on to some other stuff in a second. Last question on this. If you were the guy with the button, what do you do tomorrow to secure our schools?
In 2013, in the wake of the Newtown shooting, Democrats in the media tried to do what they're doing now, which is they went after the Second Amendment rights of law-abiding citizens. I was a brand new freshman senator, had just been there a matter of weeks, and yet I was proud to lead the fight to defend the Second Amendment in the Senate and ultimately to defeat Chuck Schumer and Dianne Feinstein's efforts to go after our constitutional rights. Remember, Dianne Feinstein famously said if she could, she would say, Mr. America, Mrs. America, give me your gun. She's made clear her objective is confiscation. That's where they want to go. Part of the way we defeated it, you don't defeat something with nothing. And so I authored what became known as the Grassley-Cruz legislation. It was also called the law enforcement alternative. It ended up getting 52 votes, a majority of votes, even in the Harry Reid Democratic Senate. It got 9 Democrats, the most bipartisan support, but ultimately Harry Reid and the Democrats filibustered it so it didn't get passed into law.
Right.
What did Grassley-Cruz did? Number one, it increased school funding by $300 million. Barack Obama had cut school funding, school safety funding.
Right.
What that could have meant for Parkland is if that bill had passed, if the Democrats hadn't filibustered it, it might have meant that another armed police officer would have been on the ground at Parkland and could have intercepted the shooter before he murdered those teenagers.
Right.
You want to talk about what actually would work? Protecting our kids would work. Beyond that, Grassley-Cruz also directed the Attorney General to audit every federal agency to make sure that they are reporting criminal convictions to the database. The shooter in Sutherland Springs, it was doubly illegal for him to buy a firearm. He had a felony conviction. He had a domestic violence conviction.
Right.
But the Air Force under President Obama didn't report that conviction. Had Grassley-Cruz passed, that audit would have reported that conviction, and then critically, Grassley-Cruz directed the Department of Justice to prosecute felons and fugitives who try to illegally buy guns. When the Sutherland Springs shooter went, lied on his background check, and tried to illegally buy a gun, if Grassley-Cruz had been passed, there's a very good possibility that he would have been prosecuted and incarcerated in a federal prison instead of murdering people in that Texas church. We can do a lot targeting criminals. If you want to solve the problem, that's what we need to be doing.
And by the way, because of your work and the president's work and others, I think 4,000 more people have been added to the list of those who can't buy guns because the armed services didn't do what you wanted them to do back in 2013. It's Ted Cruz, Republican of the great state of Texas. I want to talk DACA. You have broken from the president. The president wants to offer a path to amnesty or a path to citizenship even for 1.8 million people who could be receiving DACA deferrals, which to me, very, very, very strange, Ted, because I always thought it was 660,000. Now it's 1.8 million. How did we get that number? And what do you do with them if not offer them some path to permanency?
Well, what we're seeing in Washington right now doesn't make any sense. The American people want to see us lead on immigration, want to see us pass common sense immigration legislation, things like finally securing the border, things like building a wall and tripling the Border Patrol and investing in technology and fixed wing and rotary wing aircraft and using all of the tools we can to actually stop illegal immigration. The American people want to see us pass things like Cates Law, which I'm the author of. I introduced in the Senate. Cates Law provides for a mandatory minimum sentence for aggravated felons who repeatedly enter the country illegally. People like the illegal alien who murdered Kate Steinle, the beautiful California girl murdered on a pier by a felon who'd been in and out of jail over and over and over again, deported over and over and over again, but released from the revolving door. We should be passing legislation like Cates Law.
Well, that guy would not have been out that day had there been a law like this on the books, right?
That's exactly right. Kate Steinle would still be alive if Kate's law had passed before she was murdered. What we shouldn't do is what you just mentioned, which is pass amnesty and a path to citizenship for 1.8 million people here illegally. And for the life of me, Pat, I cannot fathom, I do not understand why so many Republicans are falling all over themselves to gallop to the left on immigration.
Well, you actually made the statement, Ted, that you think that this puts the president to the left of Barack Obama.
The proposal that an awful lot of Republicans are supporting is unquestionably to the left of the Obama policy in two respects. Number one, DACA, which was Obama's illegal executive amnesty. It was unconstitutional. It was illegal. It covered only 690,000 people.
Right.
And yet the proposal being debated is 1.8 million. That's more than double. That's nearly 3 times as many people. I cannot for the life of me understand why you would be tripling the number of people that Obama gave illegal amnesty to.
If this is the only way to get the wall built, though, and funded, is it worth the listen or it's not?
I don't believe it is. And secondly, DACA, Obama's DACA provided no path to citizenship. DACA was only a work permit.
Yeah.
It was not path to citizenship. And yet Republicans are wanting to give citizenship to 2, 3, 4, 5 million people here illegally. I do not believe we should be giving citizenship to anybody here illegally.
And by the way, what DACA did, it didn't even make them legally, give them legal status. It just said, we're going to leave you alone for a couple of years. Pay a fine, you can go to work, and we're not going to prosecute you. But it didn't say you're actually here legally. It said you had to renew this every 2 years, and we'll continue to leave you alone.
That's exactly right. I think granting citizenship to millions of people here illegally is profoundly unfair to the working men and women, to legal immigrants who waited in line years and sometimes decades. And very often, legal immigrants get left out of this debate. And I also think granting citizenship to millions of people here illegally, it's inconsistent with the promises we've made to the voters.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a serious mistake.
Well, Ted, I've got 30 seconds. What do you do with them? I honestly only have 30 seconds, but you have to do something with them. They're here.
Well, we should not be we should be enforcing the laws.
Okay.
We should be securing the borders. We should be enforcing the laws, and we should not be granting citizenship to people here illegally.
Would you be okay with permanent status, just not citizenship?
There are proposals being debated. So in the House, there's a bill, the Goodlatte bill, which would allow a work permit and not citizenship. That's substantially better.
Yeah.
I mean, that's it. I think granting citizenship is fundamentally incompatible with the promises we made the voters.
Well, listen, if nothing else, you're firm and you're consistent, and we've always appreciated that, Ted. It's Senator Ted Cruz, U.S. Senator of the great state of Texas, a Republican. I wish we had about another 30 minutes, Ted. We barely even scratched the surface, but thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, my friend.